I often find myself staring into the abyss of my memories, wishing I could rewrite the pages of my life. The story I'm about to unfold has been gnawing at my insides for the past 2 years, a constant reminder of betrayal and heartache. It's a narrative that began 11 years ago, when I married the woman I believed to be my soulmate. We had built a life together, nurturing 2 beautiful children, a vibrant 9-year-old and an adorable 3-year-old. Our marriage, I thought, was a harmonious blend of love and partnership. For the longest time, I felt fulfilled as a husband and a father. When our youngest was born, we were riding high on the waves of parenthood, reveling in the joy of sleepless nights and endless diaper changes. My wife, radiant and happy during her maternity leave, and I felt like a team, partners, lovers, and best friends. But the tides began to shift the moment she returned to her job. It was subtle at first, an imperceptible change in her demeanor that I chose to overlook. After all, I had my own colleagues to chat with, my own distractions at work. When she first mentioned a new colleague, a man who was charming, funny, and easy to talk to during breaks, I shrugged it off. I told myself it was normal, everyone has friends at work. But as the days turned into weeks, her mentions of this colleague became more frequent, and I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. The first alarming sign came when I received a frantic call from her workplace. My heart raced as I rushed to her side, only to find her pale and disoriented. She had fainted, something she'd never done before, except during her pregnancies. I brushed aside my concerns, attributing it to stress. But after the second episode, I knew we needed to see a doctor. During her appointment, she assured me it was nothing serious. But later that evening, she dropped a bombshell: she'd asked her colleague to take her to the doctor. My heart sank. Why him? Why not me? Her explanation was vague, and I felt a rising tide of unease wash over me. In the midst of this turmoil, my grandmother fell ill and was hospitalized. My wife seemed to withdraw further, her attention divided. She would suggest I take time for myself, watch a movie, play games, while she lay on the couch scrolling through her phone. It felt as though she was retreating into a world I couldn't access. When my grandmother passed away, I was devastated. The day before the funeral, my wife announced she wouldn't be attending. Instead, she had a follow-up appointment to receive her test results. I was furious and heartbroken, forced to face the grief alone. That evening, as she drifted off to sleep, a smile still painted on her lips, something in me shattered. In a moment of weakness and desperation, I found myself checking her Facebook messages. What I discovered sent chills down my spine. She was corresponding with her colleague, exchanging intimate messages that hinted at more than just friendship. "I hugged and kissed you," read one message. "You have to lay everything out for them," she had written. My heart raced as I absorbed the implications. I couldn't let it go. I needed proof, something to convince me I was wrong. I connected my phone to her account, and as I sat in church at my grandmother's funeral, the phone vibrated incessantly with their exchanges. Everything was fine, she wrote to him, while I sat in silence, shattered by her deception. Driving home, a storm raged within me. I knew what was happening. I could feel it in my bones. I confronted her that night, my heart heavy with the burden of her betrayal. She laughed it off, insisting that they only communicated through messages. But as I stood there, the truth hung heavy in the air, a truth I could no longer ignore. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself trapped in a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, confusion. My wife's insistence that her relationship with her colleague was innocent only added to my turmoil. I felt like a man dangling from a cliff, grasping at the frayed threads of our marriage while the ground beneath me crumbled away. We tried to have conversations, but they often spiraled into arguments. "It's not cheating," she would say, her eyes wide with a mixture of defiance and desperation. "We were just talking." But the truth was glaringly obvious to me: this was not merely a friendship. It was a dangerous dance, one that had crossed the line into emotional infidelity, if not more. My nights became restless. I found solace in the dim light of my phone screen, scrolling through messages long past, searching for signs of the woman I once knew. The laughter, the intimacy, the shared dreams, all replaced by a suffocating silence. I felt like a ghost in my own home, haunted by the echoes of what once was. Our children noticed the shift, the tension that crackled in the air. Their innocent laughter was a stark contrast to the turmoil that raged within me. I wanted to protect them, to shield them from the storm, but how could I when I was drowning myself? I threw myself into work, hoping to escape the churning chaos of my thoughts. But even at the office, the whispers of betrayal lingered, gnawing at my peace. One evening, while cleaning out the garage, I stumbled upon an old box filled with memorabilia from our early days together. Inside were photographs, love letters, and mementos from our courtship. I held them in my hands, nostalgia washing over me, but it quickly gave way to heartbreak. Who were we now? What had happened to the love that had once burned so brightly between us? In my darkest moments, I found myself spiraling into a pit of jealousy and rage. I envisioned my wife with him, laughing, sharing secrets, and creating new memories while I sat on the sidelines, a mere spectator to my own life. The thought consumed me, clawing at my insides, and I knew I had to confront her once more. One fateful night, I returned home to find her sitting on the couch, absorbed in her phone. The sight ignited a fire within me. I marched over, my heart pounding in my chest. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos within. She looked up, surprise flickering in her eyes, but there was also a hint of defiance. "What is it now?" she asked, her tone dismissive. "I know what you've been doing," I spat, unable to contain the anger that bubbled to the surface. "You think I haven't seen the messages? You think I'm blind to your betrayal?" Her expression shifted, a mixture of guilt and indignation. "You're overreacting. We were just friends." "Friends don't talk about passionate love," I shot back, my voice rising. "You've crossed a line, and I don't know how to come back from this." Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't soften my resolve. "You say you love me, yet you keep him in your life. How can I trust you?" Her silence spoke volumes. I could see the conflict within her, the struggle to choose between the life we had built together and the thrill of something unknown. The realization hit me harder than any blow. I was losing her, and with her, the semblance of the family we had created. For weeks, we danced around each other, a fragile truce hanging in the air. But the tension was palpable, a living entity that thrived in the space between us. I often found her lost in thought, her gaze distant, and I couldn't help but wonder if she was thinking of him. As the days turned into months, I began to realize that our marriage was now a fragile facade, one that could shatter at any moment. The love we had once cherished felt like a distant memory, replaced by a chasm of mistrust and betrayal. I wanted to believe that we could rebuild, but every time I looked into her eyes, I saw the ghost of the woman I had loved, the woman who had betrayed me. Time has a way of dulling sharp edges, but the wounds of betrayal never fully heal. As the months dragged on, I found myself caught in a cycle of hope and despair. I wanted to believe that we could salvage our marriage, that we could return to the blissful union we once had. But with each passing day, the weight of her betrayal pressed down on me, a constant reminder of the cracks in our foundation. I attempted to rebuild trust, but the effort felt one-sided. I poured myself into family activities, hoping that our children would serve as a bridge to rekindle the connection between my wife and me. We went on family outings, movie nights, and tried to engage in heartfelt conversations. Yet, every time I reached for her hand, I felt a cold distance that sent chills down my spine. It was during one of those family outings that the tipping point arrived. We had taken the kids to a local fair, and the day started on a positive note. Laughter echoed around us as we played games, rode rides, and watched our children revel in the excitement of cotton candy and carnival lights. For a fleeting moment, I felt a glimmer of hope, a reminder that we could still share joyful moments together. But as the sun began to set, I noticed her phone buzzing incessantly. My heart sank as I watched her glance at the screen, her expression shifting from mild annoyance to something more guarded. I couldn't ignore the nagging instinct that clawed at me. Who was she texting? My suspicion bubbled to the surface, and I felt a familiar rush of anger. Who are you texting? I asked, my voice strained. It's just a friend, she replied, her tone dismissive. Just a friend? Is it him? I demanded, my frustration boiling over. Stop it, she snapped, her eyes narrowing. You're being paranoid. But the damage was done. The moment hung heavy in the air, and our children's laughter faded into the background. I could feel the tension rising, the atmosphere crackling with unresolved emotions. We were supposed to be enjoying this time together, yet here we were, caught in a storm of suspicion and doubt. As we left the fair, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. I had tried so hard to give her the benefit of the doubt, to believe in our love despite everything. But every time I reached out for her, I felt her pulling away, like a balloon floating just out of reach. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the day's events in my mind. I could feel the rage bubbling beneath the surface, a fire ignited by her continued secrecy. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but a part of me hesitated. What if I was wrong? What if I was just a jealous husband, unable to let go of the past? But as the hours ticked by, I realized I couldn't ignore my instincts any longer. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I grabbed my phone, my fingers trembling as I opened up her messages. The moment I connected to her account, I felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through me. What I found made my heart race. There it was, an entire conversation filled with flirtation and innuendos. The messages revealed everything I feared. She was still longing for him, still trapped in that emotional affair. My heart shattered as I read her words, each line a dagger piercing through the fragile remnants of trust we had left. Can't wait to see you again, one message read. You make me feel alive. I felt sick. How could she? After everything we had been through, how could she continue to entertain the very thing that had nearly destroyed us? Anger surged within me, a tidal wave of betrayal crashing over me. The next morning, I confronted her. The look on her face as I laid bare the evidence was one I'll never forget. Shock, fear, and guilt played across her features, and for a brief moment, I thought she might finally understand the gravity of her actions. Why? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, raw with emotion. Why can't you let him go? Her response was a mix of tears and excuses, but all I could hear was the echo of her betrayal. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she pleaded. I love you, I swear. But I was done. The illusion of our perfect family shattered like glass, and I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I needed to take a stand, to reclaim my dignity, and to protect my children from the chaos of our failing marriage. It was time to make a choice. In the weeks that followed my confrontation, I found myself standing at a crossroads, teetering between hope and despair. My wife was desperate to mend the rift between us, shedding tears with every apology, every promise that this time would be different. But every word felt like a hollow echo, a desperate attempt to patch up the gaping wounds of betrayal that had been ripped open once more. I spent countless sleepless nights wrestling with my emotions, my mind a battlefield of conflicting thoughts. On one hand, I wanted to believe her, that our love was worth fighting for, that we could rebuild what had been broken. On the other, I felt like a fool for even considering it. How could I trust someone who had so casually tossed our marriage aside for the thrill of a flirtation? As the days turned into weeks, I noticed subtle changes in her behavior. She was more attentive, making an effort to rekindle our intimacy, but it felt forced. I could sense her desperation, but the warmth of affection I once felt toward her was buried beneath layers of resentment and mistrust. One evening, she suggested we go to couples therapy. It'll help us work through this, she insisted, her eyes pleading. I hesitated. Therapy could be a double-edged sword. On one hand, it could provide a safe space for us to explore our feelings and possibly mend our broken bond. On the other, it could expose the raw truths we had both been avoiding. After much deliberation, I agreed. We found a therapist who specialized in infidelity, and as we sat in the small, cozy office, I felt a mix of apprehension and hope. The therapist, a kind woman with a calming presence, guided us through the tangled web of emotions that had ensnared our marriage. In those sessions, I began to understand the depths of my wife's turmoil. She spoke about her insecurities, her desires for connection, and how she had sought validation in the wrong places. But as she poured her heart out, I couldn't shake the feeling that her words were merely a facade, a well-rehearsed script designed to elicit my sympathy. I found myself torn between empathy and bitterness. I wanted to support her, to help her navigate her feelings, but the anger simmered just beneath the surface. Each time she spoke about her colleague, I felt the familiar sting of betrayal resurface, and I grappled with the question, could I ever truly forgive her? As the therapy sessions progressed, I began to see glimmers of hope. We discussed our past, revisiting the moments that had brought us together, the laughter, the dreams, the love that had once filled our lives. There were flashes of the couple we used to be, moments where I could almost convince myself that we could find our way back to each other. But just when I thought we were making progress, the shadows of doubt crept in again. One evening, after a particularly intense therapy session, I returned home to find her absorbed in her phone once more. The familiar pang of jealousy twisted in my gut as I caught her glancing at the screen, a guilty expression crossing her face. "Are you still in contact with him?" I demanded, my voice rising. "It's just a message," she replied defensively, her eyes darting away. "Just a message?" I echoed, incredulous. "You said you wanted to put this behind us, yet here you are, still entertaining him." Her silence spoke volumes. I saw the guilt etched on her features, and in that moment, I realized that our journey toward healing was fraught with obstacles that I wasn't sure we could overcome. We returned to therapy the following week, but the atmosphere was different. The tension between us was palpable, and I could sense that the counselor was aware of the underlying turmoil. "Trust is built over time," she reminded us gently. "But it's also fragile. If it's broken, it takes immense effort to restore." Those words lingered in my mind like a haunting melody, and I found myself questioning whether it was worth it. Could we truly rebuild what had been shattered? Or was I simply clinging to a dream that had long since died? As I lay in bed that night, contemplating the future, I felt an overwhelming sense of confusion. I had invested so much into our marriage, into the life we had built together. Yet the thought of continuing down this path, of living in a constant state of anxiety and mistrust, filled me with dread. I realized then that I had a choice to make. I could either hold on to the remnants of our love, hoping for a miracle, or I could take a step back and reevaluate what I truly wanted for myself and for our children. The crossroads loomed before me, and I knew it was time to choose a path. After weeks of agonizing reflection, I finally reached a decision. I was tired of living in uncertainty, tired of the emotional roller coaster that had become my life. I needed clarity, and the only way to achieve that was to confront the reality of our situation head-on. The next day, I approached my wife with a heavy heart. The air felt thick with tension as I struggled to find the right words. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady yet filled with trepidation. Her eyes widened, and I could see the flicker of anxiety pass over her features. "What about?" she asked, her tone cautious. "I don't think therapy is working for us," I replied, my heart racing. "We keep going in circles, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface of the issues we need to address." Her brow furrowed, and I could sense the disappointment radiating from her. "But I thought we were making progress," she protested. "Progress?" I echoed, shaking my head. "It feels more like we're just avoiding the real problems. I can't keep pretending everything is okay when it's not." Tears welled in her eyes, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. But I knew I had to be honest, even if it hurt. I think we need a break, time apart to really figure out what we want, I continued, my voice unwavering despite the turmoil inside. She recoiled as if I had struck her. A break? You can't be serious. I am, I insisted. This isn't about punishing you, it's about giving us both space to reflect on our relationship. I need to know if I can ever truly trust you again. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as she struggled to process my words, her emotions shifting between anger, sadness, and disbelief. You're throwing away everything we've built, she exclaimed, her voice rising. No, I'm trying to save what's left, I replied, my heart aching. I can't keep living in this limbo. I need to figure out if we can move forward or if it's time to let go. As the days passed, the reality of my decision weighed heavily on both of us. We set boundaries for our time apart, agreeing to communicate only when necessary for the children's sake. It was an unfamiliar territory, a void that felt both liberating and terrifying. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of freedom wash over me. I could finally breathe without the suffocating weight of betrayal hanging over my head. I took the time to rediscover myself, to reconnect with friends I had neglected, and to focus on my children. But as the weeks turned into months, the separation took its toll. I missed the familiar comforts of married life, the laughter, the shared moments, the intimacy we had once cherished. Yet, every time I thought about reaching out to her, the memories of her betrayal clawed at my heart, reminding me of the fragility of trust. During our time apart, I sought solace in therapy for myself. I wanted to unravel the layers of pain and confusion that had enveloped me since her infidelity. It was a cathartic experience, one that allowed me to process my emotions and gain clarity about what I truly desired. As I delved into my own healing, I began to understand the importance of self-worth. I realized that I had been so focused on saving our marriage that I had neglected my own needs and desires. I wanted to be happy, to feel secure in my relationship, and to be a good father to our children. But even as I focused on my own healing, the question loomed large in my mind, could I ever truly forgive her? Could I envision a future where trust was rebuilt, and our love could flourish once more? The answer eluded me, a flickering candle in the dark. As the months rolled on, I found myself navigating the tumultuous waters of healing, both personally and in relation to my wife. The time apart had given me fresh perspectives, and while I still grappled with feelings of betrayal, I began to uncover the layers of hurt and anger I had buried deep within. I immersed myself in self-care, rediscovering passions I had once neglected. I started taking long walks, finding solace in the rhythm of my footsteps against the pavement. I reconnected with friends, enjoying nights filled with laughter and camaraderie. I even picked up a few hobbies, painting, cooking, and exploring new interests. Each small victory felt like a step toward reclaiming my identity, a way to rebuild the man I had lost amidst the chaos of my marriage. But no matter how many strides I made in my personal life, I couldn't escape the reality of my marriage. I often thought of my wife, wondering how she was coping with our separation. Was she reflecting on her actions? Was she making the necessary changes? I hoped she was using this time to evaluate her choices and the impact they had on our family. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, my phone buzzed with a message from her. "Can we talk?" it read, and my heart raced at the thought. I hesitated for a moment, the memories of our last confrontation flooding my mind. But I knew we had reached a critical juncture, it was time to face the music. We agreed to meet at a local cafe, a neutral ground where we could have an honest conversation. As I arrived, I felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. I had spent countless hours contemplating what I wanted to say, but now that the moment was here, I felt a wave of uncertainty wash over me. When I saw her sitting at a table, her expression a mix of hope and apprehension, my heart softened. She looked different, more vulnerable, perhaps. As we settled into our seats, I could sense the tension in the air. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, her voice trembling slightly. This time apart has been eye-opening for me. I realize how much I took our relationship for granted. I nodded, unsure how to respond. And what have you learned? I asked, my tone cautious yet open. I've realized that I need to take responsibility for my actions. I've been selfish, and I was looking for validation in all the wrong places. I want to work on myself, to become a better person for you and for our children, she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Her sincerity struck a chord within me, but I remained guarded. It's going to take more than words, you know. Trust is fragile, and it takes time to rebuild, I replied, my voice steady. I understand, she said, her gaze unwavering. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I've started attending therapy on my own. I want to understand why I did what I did and how to avoid those pitfalls in the future. I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. Perhaps this was the turning point we had both been waiting for. We spent the next few hours discussing our feelings, our fears, and the possibility of rebuilding our relationship. It was both exhilarating and terrifying, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. As we left the cafe, something shifted between us. There was a newfound understanding, a willingness to meet each other halfway. But I knew that words alone wouldn't be enough. Actions would need to follow, and time would tell whether we could truly navigate this path together. In the weeks that followed, we began to reconnect, slowly rebuilding the foundation of our marriage. We went out on casual dates, shared our thoughts and dreams, and created new memories together. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when the shadows of doubt crept back in, but we faced them head-on, determined to forge a new path. Yet, as much as I wanted to believe that we were on the road to recovery, a part of me remained hesitant. The scars of betrayal ran deep, and trust was not something that could be restored overnight. I often found myself questioning whether I was truly ready to forgive her and if I could ever fully trust her again. The journey was fraught with challenges, but I knew I had to stay committed to my own healing as well. I focused on being the best father I could be, ensuring that our children felt loved and secure amidst the changes in our family dynamics. They were my anchor, the reason I fought for clarity and understanding in my life. As time went on, I began to see glimmers of hope, a renewed sense of connection with my wife, moments of laughter that felt genuine, and the possibility of a future where trust could be rebuilt. But deep down, I knew it was a fragile hope, one that required constant nurturing and vigilance. Just when I thought we were making progress, the unthinkable happened. One evening, as I was putting the kids to bed, I received an unexpected phone call from a mutual friend. "Hey, I just wanted to give you a heads up," he said, his tone serious. "I saw your wife out with that guy from work last night." My heart sank. I felt the ground shift beneath me as disbelief and anger surged through my veins. "What do you mean out with him?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "They were having dinner at that Italian place downtown," he explained. "I thought you should know, especially after everything that's happened." I thanked him and hung up, my mind racing. I couldn't wrap my head around it. After all the progress we had made, how could she betray my trust once again? The memories of our conversations, the promises we had made, all felt like a cruel joke. I tried to calm myself, to rationalize the situation. Maybe it was a work-related dinner. Maybe there was an explanation. But deep down, I knew I had to confront her, to get to the bottom of this once and for all. When she returned home that evening, I confronted her. "I heard you were out with him last night," I said, my voice tight with anger. Her expression shifted from surprise to guilt as she realized I knew. "It wasn't what you think," she protested, her eyes wide. "We were just discussing a project." "Discussing a project?" I echoed, incredulous. "After everything we've been through, you still think it's appropriate to spend time with him?" "I didn't mean for it to happen," she exclaimed, her voice rising. "It was a work dinner, I swear." But the words rang hollow in my ears. The betrayal felt fresh, like salt on an open wound. You promised me you would cut all ties. How can I trust you when you keep putting yourself in these situations? Tears streamed down her face, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of compassion. But it quickly faded, replaced by a surge of anger. I had opened my heart to her again, and she had thrown it back in my face. I'm trying to change. You have to believe me, she cried, desperation lacing her voice. Believe you? I shot back, my voice trembling with rage. How can I believe anything you say when you keep breaking your promises? The argument escalated, a whirlwind of accusations and pain. I felt as though I was losing her all over again, like a dam that had finally burst, flooding us both with the toxic waters of mistrust. That night, I lay in bed, my heart heavy with despair. I replayed the conversation in my mind, grappling with the reality of her betrayal. How could she do this to us again? Was our marriage destined to be a cycle of hurt and disappointment? The days that followed were a blur of emotions. I felt like I was on a roller coaster, swinging between anger and heartbreak. We tried to talk it out, but the atmosphere was thick with tension. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was fighting a losing battle, that the trust we had worked so hard to rebuild was slipping through our fingers. I turned to my therapist for guidance, seeking clarity in the chaos. You need to protect your heart, she advised gently. Trust is built on consistency and transparency. If she continues to put herself in compromising situations, you have to consider what that means for your relationship. Those words resonated deeply within me. I realized I had to make a choice, not just for myself but for our children as well. I didn't want to expose them to a toxic environment, one filled with uncertainty and pain. They deserved stability, and I had to decide whether that stability could be found in our marriage. As I grappled with this decision, I found solace in the support of my friends and family. They encouraged me to prioritize my well-being, to focus on what truly mattered. I knew I needed to take a step back, to evaluate whether I could continue to fight for our marriage or if it was time to let go. The days turned into weeks, and as I reflected on our relationship, I realized that I had been clinging to the hope of what could be rather than facing the reality of what was. I had to confront the truth. Our marriage was built on a foundation of broken trust, and without a solid base, it was destined to crumble. I knew I had to make a decision about our future, and it was time to face the unvarnished truth. The breaking point came on a stormy Saturday evening. The rain lashed against the windows as I sat on the couch, my mind racing with thoughts of my marriage and the turmoil that had engulfed our lives. I had been trying to hold it together for the sake of our children, but the weight of my wife's betrayal felt like a ton of bricks pressing down on my chest. She came into the room, her hair damp from the rain, and I could see the worry etched on her face. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice tentative. "Sure," I replied, my heart pounding in anticipation of yet another difficult conversation. She sat down beside me, her eyes searching mine for understanding. "I know things have been tough, and I want to make things right. I'm committed to us," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm despite the storm brewing within me. "You say that, but every time I think we're moving forward, you pull me back into the darkness. I don't know how many more times I can forgive you," I said, my voice filled with pain. "I'm trying so hard," she pleaded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I've been working on myself, going to therapy, and trying to understand why I made those choices. I love you, and I don't want to lose you." Her desperation tugged at my heartstrings, but I was weary from the emotional toll it had taken. "Love isn't enough, though," I replied, my voice steady yet filled with sadness. "You need to prove that you can be trusted, that you're willing to make sacrifices for our family." "I will. I promise," she insisted, her voice rising with emotion. "I'll cut ties completely. I'll do whatever it takes." But as I watched her, I couldn't shake the feeling that her words were empty promises, echoing in the abyss of my heart. I had heard it all before, and yet here we were, standing on the precipice of despair once more. The tension in the room escalated, and I felt a surge of emotion rise within me. "You need to understand how deeply you've hurt me," I said, my voice cracking. "Every time I think we're making progress, you throw it all away. I can't keep doing this if you're not fully committed." Her face crumpled in anguish, and I felt a flicker of sympathy. But it quickly faded as the memories of her betrayal flooded my mind. "I've lost faith in us, in you," I confessed, my heart heavy with sorrow. "I'm begging you not to give up on me," she cried, her voice choked with emotion. "I want to fight for us. I want to show you that I can change." But as the rain poured outside, I felt the dam within me break. The floodgates of emotions opened wide, and I found myself at a crossroads I had dreaded for so long. "Maybe it's time for a different kind of fight," I said quietly, my heart aching. "What do you mean?" she asked, confusion lacing her voice. "I think we need to consider separating," I replied, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "I need space to figure out if I can ever trust you again, and I think you need time to reflect on your choices." Her face fell, and I could see the betrayal in her eyes. "You can't be serious," she exclaimed, her voice rising in disbelief. "You can't just walk away from everything we've built. But can we really call it built when it's on shaky ground?" I countered, my heart breaking. "I don't want to keep dragging this out. It's not healthy for either of us, or for the kids." The silence that followed was deafening, and I felt the weight of my words settle heavily between us. This was the moment I had feared, the moment where I had to confront the possibility of losing the woman I had once loved so deeply. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'll do better, I promise." But as I looked into her eyes, I realized that I couldn't keep waiting for promises that may never come to fruition. "Maybe this is the wake-up call we both need," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "It's time for us to face the truth, no matter how painful it may be." The storm outside raged on, mirroring the tempest within my heart. I knew this was a turning point, a moment that would define the course of our lives. And as I sat there, confronting the reality of our marriage, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief wash over me. This was the beginning of a painful chapter, but perhaps it was also the first step toward healing, both for me and for her. After that fateful conversation, the days that followed were shrouded in uncertainty. I felt like a ship adrift at sea, tossed about by waves of emotions, sadness, anger, confusion, and even a flicker of relief. The decision to separate loomed over me like a dark cloud, and I knew that this choice would reverberate through every aspect of our lives. My wife moved into a temporary apartment, and while the physical distance provided a much-needed reprieve, the emotional weight of our separation was palpable. I continued to focus on our children, doing my best to create a sense of stability for them amidst the upheaval. I wanted to shield them from the turmoil, to ensure they felt safe and loved, even as their world shifted beneath their feet. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself grappling with the complexities of our new reality. There were moments of clarity, moments where I felt empowered by my decision to prioritize my well-being, and yet there were also moments of profound sadness. I missed the intimacy we once shared, the laughter, the companionship that had defined our marriage for so long. One evening, as I sat on the couch scrolling through old photos, nostalgia washed over me. I saw images of us smiling, celebrating milestones, and creating memories together. It was a stark contrast to the fractured relationship we now faced. I felt a pang of longing for the love we once had, but I also knew that the past couldn't be resurrected, at least not in its former glory. My wife and I maintained a cordial relationship for the sake of our children, but the conversations felt strained, laced with unspoken tension. I could sense her desperation to reconnect, to prove that she was committed to change, but I remained guarded. Trust was not something that could be easily restored, it required time, consistency, and genuine effort. In my quest for clarity, I sought the guidance of my therapist. "You're navigating uncharted waters," she reminded me. "It's okay to feel conflicted. You're allowed to grieve the loss of your marriage while also recognizing that this separation may be necessary for both of you to grow. Those words resonated deeply within me, and I began to understand that healing was not a linear process. I allowed myself to feel the full spectrum of emotions: grief for the relationship I had hoped to salvage, anger for the betrayal I had endured, and even moments of hope for the future. As time passed, I noticed subtle changes in my wife. She seemed more introspective, more willing to engage in conversations about her feelings and the choices she had made. I found myself cautiously optimistic, wondering if perhaps this time apart had indeed sparked a transformation within her. But just as I began to entertain the idea of reconciliation, I received a phone call from her late one night. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice shaky. I could sense the urgency in her tone and agreed to meet her at a nearby cafe. As I arrived, I noticed the tension in her posture, the way her hands fidgeted nervously. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, her voice trembling. "And I wanted to apologize for everything. I've realized how much I hurt you, and I'm so sorry." I nodded, my heart heavy with conflicting emotions. "I appreciate your apology, but it's going to take time for me to process everything," I responded, my voice steady yet cautious. "I've started to understand the impact of my actions, not just on you, but on our family," she continued, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I want to be a better person, for myself and for our children. I'm committed to this journey of healing." Her sincerity tugged at my heart, but I remained guarded. "I need to see it in action." "Words are easy, but actions speak louder," I replied, my voice firm. "I want to believe that you're committed to change, but trust takes time." As our conversation unfolded, I felt a mix of hope and apprehension. Perhaps this was the moment we had both been waiting for, a chance to rebuild from the ashes of our past. But I also knew that I had to protect my heart, to remain vigilant against the possibility of further disappointment. As we parted ways that night, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. Maybe, just maybe, this separation had served its purpose, a catalyst for growth and self-discovery for both of us. Months passed, and the journey of healing continued for both my wife and me. We maintained open lines of communication, slowly rebuilding the bridge that had been burned by betrayal. I could see her making genuine efforts to change, attending therapy regularly and engaging in self-reflection. Our conversations evolved, they became deeper, more meaningful. We talked about our dreams, our fears, and the love we once shared. I found myself cautiously optimistic, allowing the glimmer of hope to flicker in my heart. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. "It's nice to be here with you," I said, my voice soft. "I've missed this," she replied, her eyes filled with emotion. "I've missed us." As the weeks turned into months, we made a conscious effort to create new memories together as a family. We took the kids on weekend outings, shared laughter over board games, and rediscovered the joy of simply being together. It was a slow process, but with each passing day, I felt the walls I had built around my heart begin to crumble. Yet, even amidst the healing, the shadows of doubt lingered. I often found myself questioning whether I could truly trust her again. The scars of betrayal ran deep, and while I wanted to believe in the possibility of a renewed relationship, the fear of getting hurt again loomed large. One evening, as we sat on the couch, I decided to address my concerns. "I want to be honest with you," I began, my voice steady. "I still struggle with trust. It's a hard thing to rebuild, and I need you to understand that it won't happen overnight." "I get it," she replied, her expression earnest. "I'm committed to proving to you that I can be trusted. I don't want to lose you again." Her words resonated within me, and I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this was the moment we had both been waiting for, a chance to rebuild from the ashes of our past. But I also knew that I had to protect my heart, to remain vigilant against the possibility of further disappointment. As the months turned into years, we continued to navigate the complexities of our relationship. There were ups and downs, moments of doubt interspersed with moments of connection. But through it all, we remained committed to the journey, allowing love to guide us. And as I look back on our story, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the healing, I realize that it is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Love is not always a straight path, it is often a winding road filled with obstacles and detours. But if we are willing to face our fears and embrace vulnerability, we can emerge stronger on the other side. I may never be able to fully erase the scars of the past, but I have learned that forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. It is a choice we make every day, a commitment to let go of the pain and to embrace the possibility of love anew. As I sit here now, reflecting on the road ahead, I am filled with cautious optimism. Together, we are writing a new chapter, a chapter that may not be perfect, but one that is filled with hope, resilience, and the promise of a brighter future.